Welcome to the podcast. I'm Rosie, channeler, psychology researcher, and guide into the deeper mechanics of reality. This is a space where we explore consciousness, perception, and what it actually means to create your life through the lens of the higher mind and non local intelligence. If you're ready to move beyond surface level thinking and understand how your reality is truly structured, you're in the right place. Stay open, stay curious, and let's begin. Okay, so after my discussion of how dreams work with Evelyn, I was thinking about how Evelyn very briefly said that the senses are not perceptual, they are integrational. And she said that what happens is they hold their own resonance and they adjust the frequency that they're receiving in order to turn it into something else that we then perceive as visual, auditory, the different things. Evelyn, can you tell me a bit? And also the other thing about the synapses. Now, this idea of synapses. So she was blending sonar and synapse to make synapse, and actually think about the synapses. Sonar is something that sends out a signal through water, and then it reads what comes back. Synapses is obviously where two neurons connect. I mean, first of all, the use of language is just so clever. It's so clever. I could have never or would have never been inclined to even consider connecting those two words. And they fit together so well as well. And this is kind of like the evidence to me of information being synthesized at a much higher level. It's a higher order thinking capability, divergent thinking, metacognitive thinking, and empathy. These are the skills that we're learning. And these are the skills that are extremely heightened in channeled information. That it seems that they're very evident in the channeled information that comes through. So that, for example, Sonapse. Now, very clever because obviously synapses, neurons are in water, they're in cerebral fluid. So, and they transmit across. They don't connect in any way. Something we call action potential, which is like the electricity comes up the neuron, or this is how we understand it in our modern psychology or neurology, travels up the neuron and then it kind of fires a pulse which sends neurochemicals to the other neuron on the other side, and that they travel across. So they don't touch the synapses. There's a space in between and things travel between that space back and forth, just like sonar. So isn't that so clever? And actually synapse might be more relevant than synapse. I don't know. I'd have to think about that a bit more, but I enjoy that. I have to say I enjoy that use of language, very clever use of language. So I'd like to say that I'd like Evelyn, since you're teaching us about biotechnology, I guess this falls into the category of biotechnology. She says, yes, absolutely it does. And the way that our senses are integrational, I'd love to know some more about this, if you could tell us more about these functions. We will start with the synapse. The variable states of synapses depends on several functions. It is a predictable and situational construct that is relative to notions of form in space and time, that allows you to witness the substitutional exhibitant of creation in progress. We have defined the resonance patterns through designated fields in order to substitute certain variable states that do not promote a full understanding of the entire structure. And this is important because we assume that there will be blind spots when you consider these attributions from a field-based modality. We will begin to first evidentially construct the notion of the sonar within the understanding or the context of brain-based modalities. Signals are represented as sound-based systemic formulations that create a resonant field or patterning system that is by its counterpart within the same resonant field of awareness or diametrically positioned state. This system produces notions of uptake and reuptake of certain neurochemical interactions that provide a background of support to the entire functional system of the body, brain, cells, organs, and neurological functions. Without these patterns, or she wants to say like repeated actions, things that happen frequently and repetitively, there is no continuity of experience. So it is a mechanical system that must maintain itself continually within the same pattern, within the same frequency, within a very specific notion of expression and formation sequentially over time without a huge amount of variability in order to maintain homeostasis within a particular representation. Of course, there is some variability in this, which is felt in the notion of mood and hormonal fluctuations, biological fluctuations, and neurological deadening. She says deadening, and I'm immediately being shown kind of the scan of the fMRI scan of a brain that is depressed, where much of it doesn't light up. And with this construct, you understand what creates life, passion, a connection to the experience of being alive within the field, and what deadens it, what immaterializes it into a lesser participatory experiential nature. So this mechanism is primary and significant in terms of relationship to life. And to disrupt this sonar, its frequency, its capacity, its function is to disrupt the individual in many ways. And if you are to understand this potential and cultivate a system of oppression that systemically disrupts this formation and this function over time through genetic manipulation, then you may be an individual who has some level of control over a larger population of individuals. Well, that took a dark turn. She said, yes, but it is necessary for you to understand. Okay, because it is relevant in what we wish to represent to you within our communications. Yes, that makes perfect sense. In terms of an antidote, she says. Yes. And so as you already understand these constructs of movement, allowing flow, allowing the brain to experience systems where relaxation is promoted and nutrition is adequate, there is less of a fear-based attribution. So now I'm getting this notion of the heart in the field of the heart and how it interacts with this field. So of course, all the different vibrations impact each other and create subtle pulses or shifts. And this obviously affects the sonar capability between the synapses because it is a frequency that's being transferred. And if you disrupt the frequency of the largest electromagnetic field in the body, then you can disrupt these frequencies. And then she's showing me that there needs to be a strengthening, almost like we need to do exercises to strengthen the current between the heart and the brain. And obviously, we've heard about heart-brain coherence, that we need to intentionally make this a part of our daily practice, just like we consider exercise a necessary part of life. We should make this heart-brain coherence a necessary part of life in order to counteract the weakening that has occurred from what this system has impressed upon us in order to control us. So if we want to improve or empower ourselves within the system, then this modality is this technique or capability or exercise is the best way to do it. And it's a bit like if you had been sat around and done no exercise for years and your muscles need to be worked. And, the best way is to go out and start walking and doing exercises and things like that. And she's saying that the best way to recover from this is to strengthen that heart-brain coherence. Then you have much more control over what you're perceiving and how, and it kind of protects you. And people always talk about protecting yourself energetically. The greatest protection is the strength of your current between the heart and the brain, or the strength of your frequency. You don't need to think about being attacked or anything like that and how am I going to defend myself energetically. You just become so internally strong in terms of your frequency and the current that's running through you that nothing can stick to you. You know, you're not resonant with anything that is not compatible with that really strong current. It's again, I refer to water. It's like if you were to pour a jug into a river, you know, you've got this big, strong current that's moving and it has direction and it's a force. And then you think, oh, I'm going to counter that by pouring this little jug of water in there and that's going to stop the flow. Not at all. That energy becomes part of the same flow and instantly adopts the flow of the river. It can't do anything else. It doesn't have enough power, you know? So it's kind of like that. That's how you protect yourself. And okay, so that was the synapses. So what about the senses and how they're integrational? Yes, we will define this in an operational manner that seeks to extend your notion of collaboration between entities. Okay, as you have already presented, this notion of your energy body, energy template that informs the heart, informs the brain, that informs she wants to say, the part of the brain that breaks everything up into digestible parts. Again, it's like a digestive system. I've often used this analogy of energy being transferred like a digestive system. You know, there are parts that it's like a big whole thing and then it gets broken down and things get taken out of it. And we use this here and we take that there, just like the digestive system. She said, yes, in a manner of speaking, but it's not necessary to view it from this perspective if it does not suit your understanding. Yes, understood, Evelyn, thank you. We will define the principles of abstraction initially in order to inform you of the overall technical capacity of the system. You currently have a model of understanding whereby existence works separately from yourselves and you are the experiencer within existence. And we would present to you an opposite notion, in fact, that you are the existence and what is represented is experiencing you, in fact. I hadn't thought of it in that way, that I think I'm in the universe and I'm experiencing the universe as something within the universe. What if I'm the universe and the thing outside is experiencing itself as my universe? It's a bit hard to put into words, but I think you get, if I just say the inverse of what it is at the moment, then you get what I'm saying. That's interesting. And so the operational manner in which you transfer your awareness into a field of observation is different in terms of how is different in function in terms of how you currently understand it to be. And so your sensorial awareness is distinct in the manner in which it transfers the information from a more diffuse body of energy or energetic awareness, fractalizing it into many distinct parts in accordance with their more defined frequency ratios, thus creating a sense of variability in the manner in which you perceive energetic information and thus project it into an experience of sensorial relationship to the field or to yourself within the field. And so the integrational aspect is understood as a by proxy informational system that is more presentative than felt. She wants to say like felt, like something that you perceive. Perceptual is more presentative than perceptual in its true nature from an operational perspective. And this is why you experience these sensorial relationships on various levels at various frequencies as inner or outer. These are not separately defined on the whole. They are different ways in which you choose to experience your relationship to the energy that is operational within the field and available to your awareness at the time. Of course, this information is also governed by you, but at a slightly higher level that is not indicative of your perceptual states. And so bridging your awareness to understand, she wants to say, the way in which you control this diluficates a distinct resonant shift from one altered state of consciousness to another. And at the varying altered states of consciousness, this information may be perceived in a manner of different ways that may not be defined in any relationship to be subordinate or hierarchical. It simply is of its own nature in its unique way, and it provides a resolution to the fundamental perceptual ignition of experience in its own purposeful directional sequence that fulfills your desired relationship with the field itself at any given moment in any given embodiment. So it does seem like you're saying definitely it's a way that energy is kind of broken down and then shifted into different vibrations in order to be experienced in different ways. But it's all the same thing. It's just that we experience it in different ways. We could take one sort of, and I'm saying blob of energy. She said, yes, this will suffice. And I'm being drawn to the clay. See, when I say blob, then I think clay. This is sculpting the clay. You know, you have the clay, which is the underlying and what they always call the substrate, as the underlying substrate. And then we take it into, and we form it into many things. But it's all the same thing. But as we form it into many things, then we perceive it in many different ways. And we might call it, this form or that form or that form. So we call it different things and we experience it in different ways. But it is all the same material. And I mean, if you bring it back again, that's a very simplistic way of saying everything is energy. It's that. Everything is energy. And then we just kind of mold it into different things, you know? And that's why we have so much power and much more power than we realize to change our experience because we're doing that. We're the ones that do that. Like she said, if we're the universe and the things are experiencing themselves in our universe as part of our universe, you know, then we're the ones who have dominion over it all. We just don't know. We're just blinded to certain aspects of it. Okay, Evelyn, what else can you tell us that's useful about the senses and how they're integrational? We would like to define the relationship between the variables in sequence. One, the archaic manifestation that resembles an inopportunistic, succumbent, tascular. I'm hearing tascular, another one. Tascular state. This provides a background of opportunity within a certain subset of variability. That means perception has, she wants to say perception, there's a lot of potentiality in the way that you may perceive something. Is a lot of variability in the way in which you may perceive something. The notion of perception itself has a lot of variability. And we don't always perceive the same thing in the same way every time. It's something that maintains fluidity and variability. Yes, and this is causal, she said, due to the inherent factors of time-space connectivity and narrative formation. Okay. to the absconded, de-integrational, personified, retroactive force of incompliability in action that maintains sequential variability within bounds of diamorphic representation and obtuse, de-entropied, and that relates to the word entropic, de-entropied, monopolist passivity in relation to valve functions of formulatory composition. Okay. The third, an individualistic, monoplacated, resonant astoundment that de-entropies the baseline scalar tone of existent or existential, abstinent or declassified, ognomorphic solution attributes. This will suffice for now. Phew, those were some words. And I have to say, I have to communicate to you when they do the words like that, when it's a lot of constructed words that seem to have some kind of scientific implication. So it feels like I'm being stretched. It feels like my brain I'm in a very heightened state of concentration where I'm really trying to pay attention to what I'm hearing because I'm hearing that. Sometimes the words come through my mouth quite easily. They just sort of come out. But there's a space between where I'm hearing words and repeating them. And sometimes I manage to close that gap, and that means the words just come out. But when it's these very big, long, constructed words, I find that very hard and I think it's because my brain won't accept them, essentially. My logical brain will not accept the words. So I'm almost at war in my brain during these words coming through because I'm trying to hold back that logical brain that's going, no, this is weird. What are you talking about? You're just making it up. You're just making it up. It doesn't sound right. It's not normal. Where are you getting that from? Why are you saying that? That's what my brain is doing. And I'm fighting it all the time to get it to allow. And there's a potential that if I at some point manage to learn trance channeling, that will be easier. But I still think that my brain doesn't necessarily have the patterning, the linguistic patterns to easily verbalize words like that, constructed words like that. Evelyn, do you see us moving into a realm where I do more trance channeling in the future, or do you prefer this mode of contact where I'm consciously aware and communicating with you at the same time? She said this is preferable since we can give you instruction in your waking moment. She wanted to say when you're awake, basically when you're conscious. And she's saying that this is claircognitively, this is coming in. She's saying that what needs to be practiced to become more familiar with this process and the way that they communicate through me isn't necessarily to do the channeling in a different way. It's to get better at channeling in this way. She just said, your channeling is perfectly acceptable to us, Rosie, and we like it a lot. That's funny. Thank you, Evelyn. Thank you for the approval. She said, you are quite welcome. She said, we admire your tenacity. That's nice. And I have to say the great thing about, and I was thinking this just today, the great thing about channeling and having these guides, whatever you want to define them as just as an extra full-on physical extraterrestrial that exists and is going to show up one day and reveal themselves to us, or just a sort of energy field somewhere that has information, or another aspect of my own higher mind, whatever you want to define them as, it really doesn't matter. But it's so useful to have this presence. It's like having a mentor or a professor or it's like having a professor at life, and they have their limitations because they don't understand the human experience in the same way. But this interaction between them and me provides, is kind of like a sounding board. If I'm thinking something and I'm wondering, why am I thinking that? Or how does that work? Or should I make this decision or this decision? Which one is going to work for me better? What kind of outcome might I get if I do this? I mean, I can just ask them. I ask them all day long. Every time I think, I wonder how to do that. I'm not sure about how I should do that. And I ask for their advice and they give me something and it's always meaningful. And obviously there's no pressure to take the advice. I'm the director in this experience and I choose to do whatever I please with my life. But to be able to communicate with them in such a dynamic way that I can literally, if I asked them to help me write an essay on a topic, they would do it and it would happen. And, or if I'm like, how do I deal with this thing with my children? Any aspect of life, they can support me. And I think for some people, it's hard to imagine what that feels like to have that support from an invisible entity that is not in physical form. To feel so supported from your guides and from this team of individuals who are collaborating with you, it makes a huge difference to your life because you don't worry about things anymore. It puts you in the mindset that there's always a solution available for me. There's always a solution. I just got to figure it out. And I'm not figuring it out on my own. I have these beings who are available to help me. And I'm sure if I wanted to find other beings who wanted to communicate with me, I could. But I'm happy with two at the moment. It is enough. Considering the complexity of information that's coming through, that's quite enough for me for now, I think. She's showing me another, oh God, she's showing me another. Yeah. As I say that, she's showing me the guy. There was a guy that came out of the nature room that I described in another episode with the Yao. There was a guy that came out of there with blonde hair. She's showing me him. Okay. So I'm feeling like she's saying he's going to make contact next. You're going to communicate with him next. She said yes. God, I'm developing an entire network of individuals. Wow. So that seems to be everything on the senses. And I wanted to cover that just because I find it very interesting the way that she described them. And of course, those words will need to be dissected and looked at and understood. So we will do the ChatGPT analysis and get to grips on exactly what she's saying. And I think as people engage with these, not just with this, but with my social media, I think that people experience these at different levels. And I try to explain what they're saying to people who don't have a physics background, don't have a scientific background, who aren't familiar with using these kinds of words. I try and break it down so that people can understand on a more basic level what they're saying. And of course, I understand it on that basic level as well. I don't understand the complexity of it. But I think for people who do use that language, I think they will, or you will, if you're one of those people, you will get more from it. And you do not have to take my word for it. You do not have to align with my interpretation of what they're saying. The whole purpose of their message and what they want to share is that people take this information and they work with it in their own unique way, in their own creative way, and allow it to inspire them to think of different ideas, essentially, about how things work. So if you're one of those people that you think maybe actually the ChatGPT explanation isn't correct in many areas or doesn't fulfill a full picture of what this is actually saying, then please, interpret it in your own way. And please do that because that's why I'm channeling it, for people to do that with it. So we'll go ahead and do the analysis next. Okay, so here's what ChatGPT says about this. And we have a lot of interesting language here to work with. So I'm very, very interested to see how those words are broken down and overall what that segment actually meant, because I couldn't off the top of my head work that out at all. And we will see. Again, we're describing the human condition through through field dynamics, aren't we? And I think, you know what I'm getting with that before I begin? I'm getting with that, and I talked this week a little bit about, Evelyn calls the space between the higher mind and the physical mind. She's saying there's this space between the higher mind and the physical mind where ideas are constructed or synthesized, where it's almost like the best of both worlds, and the information there is synthesized that has enough structure to be coherent to the physical mind, but it's synthesized in a very heightened state, which means that it's very creative. And of course, what I understand now from working with information in this way is that information is infinite. Information is synthesized in a synchronistic manner. And at that very higher mind, high level, it's all synchronicity. It's all about how things magnetize to each other through their resonance, essentially. And then the information is kind of brought down. And if you can maintain that heightened structure whilst bringing it down enough to perceive it with your conscious mind, you have something very special there. And that's what channeling is doing. She calls it the space between the two brothers. The two minds are like the two brothers. And that instantly makes me think of Enlil and Enki. And I could go off on a tangent, a symbolic tangent here, but I'm not going to. I'm going to keep it to the ChatGPT breakdown. But the reason, to come back to what I'm saying, the reason why I believe they're presenting the human condition through field dynamics, number one, because that's how they understand it on their level. It's more about that. It's less physical. It's more about that. It brings up our awareness. It brings our awareness up slightly out of the physical. They're coming down more into the physical, and we're entering that space between, and we're synthesizing information, intelligence in that space between. And there is so much possibility there. What comes from that space feels like magic because it just keeps, and I keep seeing 369. I've already done an episode on this because I keep seeing 369. I'm dreaming about Tesla. This information about Tesla is coming through. And what they're trying to show me is that you're accessing patterns. And it doesn't matter what you overlay that pattern onto, it will resonate and it will make sense because it's coming from a very high state of perception. And so it's synchronistic with most of reality or all of reality. So anything you apply it to, it fits. It's like the yin and the yang. Anything you apply it to, it fits because it's representative of a universal pattern that you become aware of. 369 is the same. My model, my framework that I'm channeling is the same. It has the same feeling about it. Like I could produce anything from this because it's representative of nature itself. It's a reflection of nature itself and how energy manifests. So what they're doing here by having us understand ourselves as a field and how we work as a field is we're entering that space between. And they talk about water. We're becoming water. Humans are becoming like water. This is what they mean. It's the space between earth and air is water. In terms of matter, the nature of matter between air and earth is water, is fluidity. That's what we're accessing in the mind. And because everything is the mind creates everything, our perceptual experience, as we enter that space, reality becomes more fluid. We work with it in a more fluid way. Time will become more fluid. We're jumping from this experience to the next. We will become eventually more fluid that we can just, well, who knows what we'll do at that point. But, you can imagine the possibilities. Anyway, let's get back to it. So here's what ChatGPT thinks this transmission is describing. Your senses are not just passive tools that perceive reality. They are integrational systems. They do not simply take in information from the outside world. They translate, organize, filter, and stabilize energy into an experience you can participate in. So when Evelyn says the senses are integrational rather than perceptual, she is making a very important distinction. Perception implies I see what is there. Integration implies my system organizes what is available into a coherent experience. And that's much closer to what neuroscience is now saying. The brain is not a camera. It's not passively recording reality. It's predicting, regulating, interpreting, and constructing a usable world from incoming signals, body states, memory, expectation, and narrative. Predictive processing and active inference theories argue that perception is shaped by the brain's ongoing predictions and corrections, not just raw sensory input. What the transmission says is this provides a background of opportunity within a certain subset of variability. In plain language, this means there is always a range of possible ways you could experience something. Your senses do not deliver one fixed reality. They provide a field of possibility. Within that field, your nervous system selects, organizes, and stabilizes one version of experience. This is why two people can be in the same room, hear the same sentence, witness the same event, and live entirely different realities from it. Not because one is wrong, but because each nervous system is integrating the field through a different history, body state, emotional tone, attribution system, and narrative structure. That is what I think she means by there is a lot of potentiality in the way that you may perceive something. Or in the corrected language, there is a lot of potentiality in the way that you may integrate something. The senses are not just perceptual, they are formative. They participate in the shaping of reality. Synapses. So she started with synapses. Now, the word synapses feels important here. I would break it down as sonar, sound, signal, echo, resonance, detection through vibration, and synapses or synapse, the joining point, the place of transmission between neurons. So synapses could mean a resonant neural signaling system where experiences form through echo, frequency, repetition, and relational transmission. Not just synapses as chemical junctions, but sonapses as the larger resonant system of the body-brain field relationship. And that actually maps beautifully onto current neuroscience because the brain is not only chemical, it's electrical, it's rhythmic, it's oscillatory. Neural oscillations, synchrony, phase locking, and electromagnetic fields are increasingly studied as part of how distributed brain activity becomes integrated into coherent experience. Some electromagnetic field theories of consciousness, like McFadden's chemi theory or semi theory, CEMI theory, propose that brain activity may involve both neuronal synaptic processing and endogenous electromagnetic field integration. This is not settled science, but it is an active and emerging theoretical space. So in your language, synapses is the resonant bridge between signal and experience. It is the way the body receives, echoes, repeats, stabilizes, and translates energy into something you can feel as my reality. Time-space connectivity and narrative formation. The transmission then says this variability is caused by time-space connectivity and narrative formation. This is powerful because experience is not just sensation. Experience is sensation placed into time, space, and story. The body asks, where am I? When is this happening? Have I felt this before? What does this mean? Is this safe? Is this mine? Is this familiar? What story does this belong to? That is narrative formation. And in predictive processing terms, the brain uses prior experience to anticipate what's happening now. The present moment is not just received, it is interpreted through accumulated models of the past and projected possibilities of the future. So the senses are integrational because they bind sensation into a temporal story. This also connects to introception and allostasis. Introception is the sensing of internal body states. Allostasis is the brain's anticipatory regulation of the body. Recent models suggest the brain is constantly predicting and regulating energy balance through internal bodily signals. So when someone says, I feel anxious, that's not just an emotion, it's an integrational event. The body, brain, memory, hormones, nervous system, and narrative field are all coordinating into one felt conclusion. Constructed words, absconded, from abscondir, to hide away. In this context, it may mean a hidden or withdrawn force in a system, something operating outside conscious awareness. Deintegrational, a force that pulls apart coherence, not destruction exactly, but separation from wholeness. Personified, made personal. The field becomes me. A neutral energetic pattern becomes my anxiety, my identity, my problem, my story. Retroactive force, a backward acting influence. In psychological terms, the past reorganizes the present. In narrative terms, the story you carry from before shapes what you can perceive now. Now, I would wonder about that only because I very much align with the idea that the present shapes the past. And so for me, the narrative is not distinctly created through the past experience, but perceptually, it's what we would call the past, if that makes sense. Viability, the inability or refusal of a system to comply with a fixed pattern. I think that's pretty obvious. Diamorphic, they use that term every session. So we're familiar with diamorphic. It's a representation that exists across forms, suggesting that one underlying energy can appear in multiple forms. De-entrophied or de-entrify. This seems related to entropy. Entropy is disorder, uncertainty, or the number of possible states in a system. To de-entrify may mean to reduce disorder. Monopolist specificity. Mono, one. Polus may suggest pole or polarity. Specificity means precision. This could mean a single dominant organizing pole that narrows the field into one specific experience. Valve functions. A valve regulates flow. In this context, the senses may act like valves, opening, closing, filtering, and controlling how much information enters conscious integration. Formulatory composition, the way form is composed, that's quite obvious. Monoplicated, a single folded in pattern, one experience containing many hidden layers. Astoundment, a state of being struck by an experience, the nervous system encountering something that exceeds its usual model. Scalar tone, scalar fields in physics assign a value to every point in space. Tone suggests frequency or felt quality. So scalar tone could mean the baseline energetic value or felt frequency of existence. Absonant, away from resonance, a dissonant or non-resonant state. These are wonderful. This is a wonderful, what a wonderful way to use words. I'm not interested in language really, but the way that these words have been constructed and they actually mean something solid, and I'm still amazed that this happens. They mean something solid and they make sense within the context of what's being spoken about. Amazing. Ognomorphic, that was the one that really stood out to me. And I thought, oh, that's a fun word. Ognomorphic. Possibly from ogno or gnosis or morphic, a knowing form, a form of intelligence embedded in structure. Wonderful. So, plain language overview. The transmission is saying your senses do not simply perceive reality, they integrate energy into experience. There is a field of variability around every event. You do not experience the event itself in a pure way. You experience the version your system can organize. This organization depends on time, space, narrative, memory, body state, emotional tone, and the resonant patterns of the synapses. When the system is coherent, energy can move into a living participatory experience. When the system is disrupted, hidden forces can fragment integration. The person may experience reality as heavy, deadened, confusing, or overly fixed. The antidote is not only mindset, it is regulation, movement flow, nutrition, relaxation, emotional safety, and the restoration of integrational capacity. the scientific bridge here. In real science, I would relate this to 5 areas. First, predictive processing. The brain constructs experience through prediction and correction. Second, active inference. The organism acts to reduce uncertainty and maintain coherence between body and world. Third, allostasis and introception. The brain regulates the body by predicting internal needs. Fourth, criticality. I have not heard of that before. The healthy brain may operate near a dynamic balance between order and disorder. Too much rigidity and the system becomes deadened. Too much chaos and the system loses coherence. Studies on anesthesia and consciousness suggest unconscious states move away from critical dynamics and the edge of chaos. That reminds me instantly of how they make neural networks for AI. In AI, they create what they call neural networks. And in testing them, and I think I got this from John Vervaeke, he talks about this in one of his lectures on YouTube. They test neural networks to ensure that they don't become too streamlined. And what they found was that they had to introduce noise, essentially, to ensure that the informational systems didn't become too streamlined, that they didn't embrace change and variability. And he was saying how that mirrored human neural networks, that you have to introduce chaos in order to create expansion. So it's this kind of process between chaos and order, chaos, order, chaos, order. And actually, if you look at many indigenous ceremonies or rituals involve, drumming, loud noises, or things that might sound like audibly very chaotic, and then they integrate that into the trance state. They use that to get into the trance state. So they're using this sense of chaos and reducing the sense of order in order to expand the awareness, and then they bring it back to order again. So it's kind of an inherently understood process of human nature, and how the brain integrates information. And I think probably the heart is at the center of that, obviously. Fifth, the field and oscillation theories. Brain rhythms, synchrony, local field potentials, and electromagnetic activity may play a role in binding distributed information into coherent experience. Again, this is emerging and debated, but it gives us a scientific language for why resonance may not just be poetic. So the deeper message is you are not merely perceiving life, you are integrating it, and the quality of your integration determines the quality of your reality. That is why healing is not just changing thoughts, it's changing the way the whole system receives, organizes, and stabilizes the field. Oh, I like that one. I like it a lot. And well, there we are. I hope that you enjoyed this as much as I did. And that is Evelyn's take on the synapses and the senses and how they work. Thank you so much for listening. Take care, everybody.